the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the usual kind of silence, where everyone's just taking a breath, but the kind that settles in your gut and makes you second-guess everything you've ever known about the world around you. It wasn't even something that happened in the blink of an eye. No, this was slow, gradual. The change in the air, the subtle shift that you didn't realize was happening until it was too late. It started on a random Wednesday, a day like any other, but for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't know if it was the way Zoey had looked at me over breakfast, or the brief moment when our eyes locked while she was scrolling through her phone and quickly looked away. You know that feeling when your partner's gaze is distant, and for just a split second, you wonder if they're seeing someone else? Yeah, that was it. It didn't help that I was stressed at work. The pressure was mounting, and every little thing seemed to be grating on my nerves. But still, there was that feeling. That nagging thought at the back of my head that something wasn't right between Zoey and me. She had been acting differently for a while. Not drastically different, but enough to make me feel like I was losing track of something important. For weeks now, she had been busy with something I couldn't quite place. Her attention was scattered, like she was only half present in our conversations, like she was somewhere else entirely. One evening, I came home a little later than usual, hoping we could finally catch up after a long week. But when I walked in, the house was quiet. Zoey was on the couch, looking at her phone. Her face was illuminated by the screen, and she didn't even look up when I stepped in. "Hey," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "How was your day?" She didn't respond right away, which was odd. She usually had something to say, even if it was just about a random thing that happened at work. But tonight, she just swiped through her phone and muttered a quick, "Fine." It was almost like I wasn't even there. I took a deep breath, telling myself I was overreacting. But that feeling, the one I couldn't shake, kept building. I tried to engage her in conversation again, but each attempt felt forced, like I was trying to pry something out of her that she didn't want to give. Finally, she put her phone down, her eyes avoiding mine. "I'm just tired," she said, her voice trailing off. At that moment, I had this weird, almost gut-wrenching realization. It wasn't that she was tired, it was that she didn't want to engage with me. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't ignore the signs. The way she stopped initiating plans, the way she started spending more time out of the house, the distant conversations and late-night meetings she'd started attending. And there I was, clueless, trying to make sense of it all. A few days later, I got an invitation to a work event, a party, more like a casual get-together at one of our colleagues' places. Normally, I'd have gone alone, but something felt different that week. Zoey hadn't mentioned anything about it, but I figured I'd ask. "Hey, there's this party on Friday night. Do you want to come with me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't even look up from her book when she replied, "I don't think so. I've got a lot of things to catch up on." The response was so quick, so nonchalant, like she had already made up her mind before I even asked. I didn't push it. It wasn't like we had to do everything together, but something about her refusal, about how it felt like she was just brushing me off, stuck with me. I went to the party alone, half expecting it to be a boring evening of small talk and bad music. But what happened at that party, I could never have predicted. When I got to the venue, a small bar in the middle of town, I felt out of place. Most of the people there were from work, but no one I knew really well. I grabbed a drink and sat at a table by myself, scrolling through my phone, trying to look engaged. I wasn't paying attention to the time, just lost in thought, when suddenly someone slid into the seat across from me. It was Zoey. She was wearing that black dress I loved, the one that always made her look like she was ready to go out on a runway. But there was something off about her tonight. Her eyes weren't sparkling like usual. Her lips weren't curled into the warm smile I'd grown accustomed to. She didn't even seem happy to see me. "Hey," I said, surprised to see her. "What are you doing here?" Zoey didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and checked it, then looked back up at me. "I thought I'd stop by. I'm not staying long." I stared at her, trying to understand what was going on. "Is everything okay? You've been acting distant lately." She shrugged, her expression unreadable. "I'm just busy. I told you." And that was it. No explanation. No real connection. Just a vague excuse that made my stomach churn. It was as if she was a stranger, someone I barely recognized, and I was suddenly stuck in a room full of people with no one to turn to. I tried to make small talk, but she kept checking her phone, her attention fully on whatever was happening there. That was when I saw him. "Luke," I had no idea who he was, but the moment Zoey glanced at him, I saw the spark. It was subtle, but it was there. A glance that lingered too long, a smile that was too genuine. Something about the way she looked at him. It hit me. Hard. My heart skipped a beat. Was I wrong? Was this what I had been feeling all along? Was she already with him? Or was I just too late to realize what had been happening right under my nose? I tried to push the thoughts aside, but they kept creeping back in, each one more terrifying than the last. I sat there, frozen in place, watching as Zoey interacted with this guy, Luke. It wasn't like I had never seen her talk to other people before, but this was different. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way her laughter seemed more genuine, more carefree, or the way she tilted her head when she spoke to him, as if she were actually listening, really engaged. It felt intimate, and it was making me feel invisible. I tried to focus on something else, anything else, but every time I looked up, they were there, talking, laughing, sharing moments I felt I was never invited to. I wasn't angry, not yet, but there was a growing sense of unease gnawing at my insides. What was happening? Why was she here, at this party, when she had told me she was busy? She had practically brushed me off when I invited her, but now she was here, looking completely at ease, almost like she belonged in this world of bright lights, laughter, and whispers, while I was left on the sidelines, questioning everything. I decided to take a walk, just to clear my head. The bar was getting crowded, the music thumping in the background. I needed air, I needed space. I stepped outside and took a deep breath, letting the cool night air hit my face. It was the kind of crisp evening where the stars almost felt close enough to touch. As I walked along the street, my mind was spinning. Was I being paranoid? She was just talking to someone, right? People have friends. People have connections. But that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Why had she not told me she was coming to this party? Why was I the one left in the dark? I tried to shake it off, but as I walked back to the bar, something else caught my eye. Zoey and Luke, standing too close to each other. Their conversation had shifted. They were laughing again, but it was different this time. It was the way their bodies leaned in towards each other, how their faces were just inches apart. I caught myself holding my breath, my heart hammering in my chest. It was a stupid thought, but it hit me all at once. Had I missed something? Had Zoey and I been drifting for longer than I had realized? I needed answers. I turned back toward the entrance of the bar, my mind racing. I couldn't just sit there and pretend I didn't see what was happening. Zoey wasn't the type of person to flirt. Not like this, at least not in front of me. But there was something about Luke, something about the way they interacted that didn't sit right with me. I made my way back to the table where I had been sitting earlier, trying to stay calm. The minutes felt like hours. Every second that ticked by felt like a reminder that I wasn't in control of this situation. And then, just as I was about to grab another drink to drown out the discomfort, Zoey appeared in front of me. She was standing there, smiling, but her smile wasn't the one I knew. It wasn't the smile I had seen every day for the past 6 years. It was different, almost forced. She looked like she was trying to convince herself that everything was okay. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "I thought I'd find you out here. You good?" I stared at her for a moment, searching her face for any sign that she was lying. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, trying to sound casual. Just needed a breather. But it wasn't fine. I was far from fine. She hesitated before sitting down next to me. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was coming," she said, her voice a little quieter now. "I just needed some space tonight. You know how I get when I'm stuck at home all week." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her explanation didn't make sense. "Yeah, but you didn't want to come with me. You said you had things to do. So why come here now?" Zoe's eyes flickered briefly to the side, as though she was considering her words carefully. She shrugged, giving me that half-hearted smile. "I don't know, Martin. I guess I just changed my mind. It's not a big deal, right?" It wasn't the answer I wanted. I was hoping for something more, something that would clear up the mess that had been building up inside my chest. But instead, I got this vague response. As I opened my mouth to say something else, Luke appeared out of nowhere, casually strolling up to our table. He leaned against the edge, his smile wide, too wide. I had seen him a few times throughout the evening, but it was the way he looked at Zoey that made my stomach churn. "Everything okay here?" Luke asked, his voice too friendly, too casual. I forced a smile, but I could feel the tension in my shoulders. "Yeah, just chatting." Luke looked between the two of us, almost as if he was silently assessing the situation. His eyes lingered a moment too long on Zoey before he spoke again, his tone still light. Good to see you both. I was wondering if Zoey wanted to join me and the guys for a round of shots. You know, to make up for the earlier. We were talking about some funny stuff, and I thought she'd enjoy it. I watched Zoey's face for any hint of discomfort, but all I saw was that small, almost intrigued smile she gave him. Sure, she said, before glancing at me. You don't mind, right? I wanted to say something. Anything, but the words stuck in my throat. The way she said that, like it was no big deal for her to just leave me there, felt like a slap in the face. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, forcing a smile. No, go ahead. Enjoy. And with that, she stood up, turning to follow Luke to the bar, her back to me the entire time. The weight of her leaving hit me hard, harder than I expected. I stayed frozen for a moment, watching her walk away, trying to process what had just happened. But nothing made sense. Zoey wasn't acting like herself. The woman I married wasn't the woman I was seeing now. Something had changed, and I couldn't figure out when it happened or why. I was left sitting there, alone in the noise of the party, wondering how I had become a stranger in my own life. Was I just blind all this time? Was this the beginning of something I couldn't stop? My gut told me this wasn't just a phase. It was something much bigger, something I was about to face head-on whether I was ready or not. The moments after Zoey walked away with Luke felt like they stretched on for hours. I didn't even try to follow them. I knew better than to give in to that impulsive urge to chase after them. But the feeling of being left behind, of being a mere spectator in my own life, stuck with me like a knot in my stomach. I sat there, holding my drink, pretending to be part of the world around me, when in reality, I felt completely disconnected. I looked around at the people laughing, talking, dancing. Everyone seemed so carefree. Their lives appeared so effortless, while mine had started to feel like a tangled mess. Zoey, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had turned into someone I no longer recognized. It wasn't just the coldness between us lately, the distance that had been creeping in little by little, it was this. Tonight, her actions, the way she was with Luke, the way she had just left me there without a second thought. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It gnawed at me, that whisper in the back of my mind telling me this wasn't normal, that something was off in a way I couldn't explain. Something had changed, and I had missed it. I finished my drink quickly, then ordered another. I had to get a grip. This was just a phase, right? Maybe it was just a little flirting, nothing serious. Maybe she was just in a playful mood tonight. People had their moments. I tried to convince myself it wasn't anything more. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was fooling myself. I glanced over to the bar, where Zoey and Luke were now sitting, their backs turned to me. She was laughing, her face illuminated by the neon glow of the bar's lights. She hadn't laughed like that with me in weeks, if not longer. Her shoulders were relaxed, her body language open. Luke was leaning in, making a joke, and Zoey was responding just a little too enthusiastically. The way they interacted seemed so natural, so comfortable, like they had known each other forever. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know what was going on, even if it meant confronting her, even if it meant facing the truth that I wasn't ready to hear. I stood up, my legs shaking slightly as I walked toward the bar, trying to keep my composure. My heart pounded in my chest. I was scared of what I might find, scared of what Zoey might say. As I approached the bar, I took a deep breath. This wasn't a casual question. This wasn't a conversation about the weather or something trivial. No, this was about us, about everything that had been changing, everything that had been quietly falling apart. Zoey and Luke were still sitting there, their conversation now flowing easily, the space between them growing smaller by the second. I hesitated for a moment, watching them, before Zoey noticed me standing there. She looked up, her eyes briefly widening, then narrowing in what almost seemed like surprise. But then, almost as quickly, her expression softened, and she gave me a smile. It wasn't the smile I was used to, the one that was warm and inviting, but a polite, distant one. The kind of smile someone gives when they're trying to avoid something uncomfortable. Hey, she said, her voice light, almost too light. What's up? I didn't sit down. I couldn't. I needed to stand, to be grounded, to face this head on. Zoey, what's going on? Why are you here with Luke? Her smile faltered for a second, just a flicker, but it was enough for me to notice. What do you mean? She asked, her voice tinged with confusion. but there was something in her eyes that told me she knew exactly what I was asking. I pushed forward. You told me you weren't coming. You told me you were staying in. And then I show up, and here you are, having a great time with him. What's going on, Zoey? There was a beat of silence between us. Luke didn't speak, but he watched us quietly, his eyes darting between the two of us. His presence was suffocating, like he was a part of the conversation, even though he hadn't said a word. Zoey cleared her throat, her eyes flickering to Luke, then back to me. It's not what you think, Martin. She didn't sound convincing. The words came out too quickly, too rehearsed. Luke and I were just talking, nothing more. I felt a surge of anger rising within me, but I kept it in check. I had to. Talking, I echoed. It doesn't look like just talking to me, Zoey. It looks like you're getting close to him, closer than you've been with me in months. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. I was tired of pretending, tired of being the one who ignored the signs. She looked away, her fingers playing nervously with the rim of her glass. Martin, I'm not, she began, but she stopped herself. I saw it then. The hesitation, the guilt, maybe, or the frustration. Maybe both. I don't know what's happening between us. I continued, my voice lower now, quieter, almost like I was speaking to myself. But I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I've been feeling it for weeks, Zoey. You've been pulling away, and I can't just ignore it anymore. Zoey's face softened, and for a split second, I thought I saw the woman I married. But then, just as quickly, the mask slipped back on. She sighed, clearly frustrated, and ran a hand through her hair. You're overthinking this, she said, her tone cool, almost dismissive. It's just a phase. I don't know. I've been busy with work, with everything. You're just making something out of nothing. But I knew better. I wasn't overthinking anything. I had seen the way she acted, the way she laughed with Luke, the way her attention seemed to be pulled elsewhere. Zoey, this isn't a phase, I said quietly, my voice trembling slightly. I don't think you realize how far things have gone. You don't even seem to care about us anymore. Her face hardened, and she finally stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You know what, Martin? Maybe you're right, she said, her words cutting deeper than I expected. Maybe I'm not the same person you married. Maybe we're not the same anymore. And with that, she turned and walked away, Luke following closely behind her, leaving me standing there, paralyzed by the weight of her words. In that moment, I knew. I knew something had changed, something irreversible, and I wasn't ready to face what was coming next. I didn't follow her this time. This time, I just stayed, frozen in place, as the party carried on around me, ignoring the chaos inside my own head. It was too late. Everything had already shifted, and I was no longer part of it. The silence that followed Zoey's words was louder than anything I had ever experienced. She didn't even look back as she walked away, her heels clicking on the floor with a rhythm that seemed to echo in my chest. I wanted to follow her, to grab her arm and make her explain, to demand that she look me in the eyes and tell me what was really going on. But something stopped me. It was as though I was paralyzed, unable to move, caught in a moment where I no longer knew who I was or where I stood in her life. I stayed at the bar, staring into my drink. The ice cubes had melted by now. The liquid was lukewarm, but I didn't care. I was numb, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say to her, all the things I needed to understand. Why hadn't she told me the truth? Why had she been acting like this? The questions were piling up, each one more urgent than the last, and yet I felt more alone than I had in years. Luke and Zoey disappeared into the crowd, blending into the noise of the party as if nothing had happened, as if I was just another face in the crowd. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could she act like nothing was wrong? How could she so easily turn her back on everything we had built together? I wasn't some paranoid guy, always jumping to conclusions. But this was different. This was real. Something had changed, and it wasn't just in her. It was in me too. I felt like I was watching a stranger live my life. I was about to leave. I wanted to leave. Get in my car and drive far away from this place, from all the chaos that had unfolded in just a few short hours. But before I could move, Maya, the host of the party, came up to me, her expression unreadable. You okay? She asked, her voice quiet but concerned. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to admit that everything had crumbled in front of my eyes, that the woman I had loved for years was slipping away from me. But I couldn't lie. No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't think I'm okay. Maya sat down beside me, her gaze softening as she looked at me. Want to talk about it? She asked, her tone gentle. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Maya wasn't a close friend, but she was kind. She always seemed to understand when people were struggling. I didn't know why, but I suddenly found myself opening up to her, my words spilling out before I could stop them. Zoe's been different lately, I said, my voice shaky. I don't know what's happening, but I feel like I'm losing her. I've been trying to ignore it, trying to convince myself that it's just a rough patch. But tonight it feels like everything changed. Maya nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting something like this. I've noticed the way she's been acting, she said carefully. She's been a little distant, a little distracted. I thought maybe it was just work or something, but it's been going on for a while now. The words hit me harder than I expected. You noticed? I asked, the weight of her observation sinking in. And you didn't say anything? Maya looked away, her lips pressing together for a moment. It wasn't my place to say anything, Martin. You two have your own relationship. But sometimes people change. Sometimes, without even realizing it. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to make sense of what she was saying. But why? Why is this happening? What did I miss? I've been trying to be there for her, to understand, but it's like she's pulling away from me, and I don't know how to fix it. Maya looked at me with a sadness in her eyes. I don't know, Martin. Relationships are complicated, and sometimes people change in ways that we don't expect. Maybe Zoe's going through something, or maybe she's found someone else who makes her feel seen. I don't know, but you have to talk to her, really talk to her, if you want to figure it out. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that Zoe had found someone else. But the more I thought about Luke, the more I couldn't ignore the possibility. The way they had looked at each other, the way she had lit up when he walked into the room. It was too much to be coincidence. But I didn't want to confront her yet. I wasn't ready. The thought of facing the truth terrified me more than anything. If she had been seeing someone else, if she had been lying to me all this time, I didn't know if I could handle it. So what do I do? I asked, my voice trembling. How do I fix this? Maya gave me a sympathetic smile. I can't tell you what to do, Martin. But if you care about Zoe, you have to talk to her. Don't let this fester. You deserve to know what's really going on. I nodded, though the weight of her advice felt like a burden I wasn't sure I could bear. I wasn't ready to confront Zoe. I wasn't ready to face the possibility that everything I thought I knew about our marriage might be a lie. But deep down, I knew I had to. The truth was hanging over us like a dark cloud, and sooner or later, it was going to burst. As I sat there, surrounded by laughter and light, I realized one thing. This wasn't just about Zoe. It was about me too. I had let this go on for too long without asking the hard questions. I had been too passive, too willing to let things slide. But now, I could feel the change inside me. I wasn't going to sit back anymore. It was time to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I just hoped I was ready for what I might uncover. The days after that night at the party passed in a haze. Each morning I woke up with the same knot in my stomach, a constant reminder that something in my life was unraveling, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I kept telling myself I would confront Zoe, that I would finally get the answers I needed, but every time I tried to summon the courage, something held me back. It wasn't just fear of the unknown, though that was a big part of it. It was the weight of the uncertainty. What if I was wrong? What if everything was just in my head, and I had made a fool of myself for nothing? But the doubt kept gnawing at me. I couldn't ignore the signs. Zoe's distance. The way she had been pulling away from me slowly, bit by bit. The way she had smiled at Luke that night. The way she laughed like she hadn't in months. The way she had left me standing there, alone, without a second thought. That wasn't something small, something I could brush aside. It felt like the kind of thing you could never come back from. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I knew I had to confront her, but every time I thought about it, I was paralyzed with doubt. What if I didn't get the closure I needed? What if I didn't like the truth? But I wasn't stupid. I could feel it in my bones. Things had changed. The woman I loved, the woman I had shared my life with, had become someone else. And I wasn't sure if I could ever find her again. That evening, after another long day at work, I found myself standing in front of the apartment, the familiar space that had once been a sanctuary now feeling more like a prison. Zoe was inside. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes, the soft hum of the radio in the background. It was like nothing had changed on the surface. But I knew better. I opened the door quietly and stepped inside. Zoey was at the counter, her back turned to me. She didn't even look up as I entered. It felt like I was walking into the eye of a storm. "Hey," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "Can we talk?" She paused for a second, then slowly turned around. There was a blankness in her eyes that sent a chill down my spine. She looked tired, but that wasn't what bothered me. It was the way she looked at me, like I was a stranger she was trying to avoid. "Of course," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I closed the door behind me, took a deep breath, and walked toward the living room. Zoey followed, her footsteps soft on the floor. When I turned around to face her, the air between us felt thick, heavy. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than words. "You've been distant lately," I started, my voice shaking slightly despite myself. "You've been pulling away, and I don't know why. I've been trying to ignore it, but I can't anymore. You've been different, Zoey, and I need to know what's going on. What's happening with us?" Zoey didn't say anything right away. She crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor, her lips pressed tight. There was something about the way she was avoiding my gaze that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't just a temporary phase. This was real, and I was about to get the truth. "Martin," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to say this." My heart dropped. "What?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "What's going on, Zoey?" She took a deep breath, clearly struggling with the words. "I've been seeing someone else," she said, the words hanging in the air between us like a bombshell that had just gone off. I stood frozen, unable to process what I had just heard. The room felt like it was spinning, my chest tightening with a wave of nausea. I had suspected it, of course, but hearing it out loud was a different kind of gut punch. I had thought I could handle this, that I could keep my emotions in check. But now, with her words hanging in the air, everything seemed to crash down at once. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to say more, waiting for an explanation that would somehow make sense of everything that had been happening. But Zoey didn't offer one. She just stood there, her arms crossed, looking as though she was bracing herself for whatever would come next. "So, you've been seeing him for how long?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. I couldn't keep the hurt from seeping through. "Luke, how long has this been going on?" Zoey sighed, her eyes avoiding mine again. "A few months," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "It started, casually. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And I've been trying to figure out what I want, but I've been so confused lately. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. A few months? That was how long this had been going on. I thought we had been fine. We had our problems, sure, but nothing that couldn't be worked through. At least, that's what I had told myself. But Zoey had been slipping away, little by little, and I had been too blind to see it. She hadn't been the same for months. "Did you ever think to tell me?" I asked, my voice rising now, the anger bubbling to the surface. "Did you ever think that maybe I deserved to know? That maybe I deserved the truth?" Zoey flinched, but she didn't look at me. She looked at the floor, the weight of her guilt clearly too much to bear. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you," she repeated, her voice barely audible. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned away from her, pacing the living room in circles. My heart was pounding, my thoughts racing. I was furious. Furious at her. Furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. But mostly, I was just heartbroken. "You've been lying to me, Zoey," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've been lying to me for months, and now you're standing here, telling me that you've been with someone else this whole time. Do you even care about me at all? Did you ever?" I could see her shoulders tremble. She finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Of course I care about you," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it had. It had happened, and nothing could undo it." I stood there, staring at her, trying to make sense of everything, but nothing seemed to fit together anymore. The person I had trusted, the woman I had shared my life with, had betrayed me in ways I never imagined. And now, standing in front of her, I realized there was no going back. Our marriage, our life together, was crumbling. And no matter how much I wanted to fix it, the damage had already been done. "I need to think," I said finally, my voice hoarse. "I can't do this right now." And without another word, I turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving Zoe standing there, her tears silent in the empty space between us. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. Things would never be the same. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog. The apartment, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt like a cold, alien space. I spent most of the time in the living room, staring blankly at the walls, replaying Zoe's words in my head over and over again. I've been seeing someone else. The words cut through me each time they echoed in my mind, like a sharp blade carving into everything I thought I knew about my life. Zoe had left the next morning, her bags packed and her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something I couldn't quite place. Relief, maybe? She didn't say much. There were no apologies, no grand gestures to make it right. She just left. The front door closed behind her, and I was left with nothing but silence and a crushing weight in my chest. I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just wandered through the days, pretending I was fine when I was falling apart inside. Every corner of the apartment reminded me of her. The photos on the wall, the books we had shared, the little things she had left behind. Each one felt like a reminder of how much I had lost. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand how it had all gone so wrong. I had tried so hard, had given everything to our relationship, and yet, somewhere along the way, it had all slipped away without me even realizing it. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood. It wasn't just Zoe. It was me too. I had let things slide. I had ignored the signs, brushed aside the growing distance between us. It wasn't until she had walked away that the full weight of my own neglect hit me. I called her several times, hoping she would pick up, hoping that somehow I could fix things, but the calls went unanswered. It was like I had never mattered. I tried to convince myself that it was for the best, that maybe this was the wake-up call I needed to finally see the truth. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Zoe had been my whole world, and now I was left standing in the wreckage of it. A week later, I received a text from her. Just 3 words. We need to talk. My heart stopped. My fingers hovered over my phone screen, unsure of what to do. Part of me didn't want to hear whatever she had to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand she explain herself. But I also knew that I couldn't move forward without hearing her side of the story. As much as I hated it, I needed closure. I agreed to meet her at a small coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a table near the window, staring out at the street, lost in thought. She hadn't changed much, still the same Zoe, the same face I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But there was a heaviness about her now, a weight in her posture that hadn't been there before. She looked up when I sat down, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Hey," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for everything. For how things went down. For not being honest with you sooner." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me when it first started? Why wait until it was too late?" Zoe's eyes flickered with emotion, her lips trembling slightly. "I didn't know how," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you that I had been feeling disconnected. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought maybe things would get better, that maybe I could fix it on my own, but I couldn't. And then, I met him." She paused, swallowing hard, as though the words were getting caught in her throat. "It wasn't supposed to happen the way it did. I didn't plan on falling for him. It just happened." I clenched my fists under the table, my heart aching with each word she spoke. "You didn't plan it?" I asked, the bitterness in my voice leaking out despite my best efforts to stay calm. "You didn't plan on it, but you still let it happen. You still chose him over me. You chose to keep it a secret. And now you're telling me you don't even know how it happened?" Zoe looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting together. "I'm sorry, Martin. I didn't want it to end like this. I didn't want to hurt you. You've been such a good husband, and you didn't deserve any of this. But I've been feeling so lost for so long, and I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to admit that I had fallen out of love with you." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know what to say. How could I respond to that? The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, was telling me she had fallen out of love with me. It was like she was speaking a language I didn't understand anymore. How could this happen? How could everything we had built just crumble away like sand slipping through my fingers? "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words tasted bitter, but they were the truth. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Zoe's eyes welled up with tears. I understand, she said, her voice breaking. I never expected forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. I didn't want to keep lying to you anymore. I looked at her, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Why didn't you fight for us, Zoey? Why didn't you tell me what was going on? I would have done anything to save us. She shook her head slowly. I don't know, Martin. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe I thought I could fix it on my own, or maybe I just didn't know how to ask for help. But I'm sorry. I really am. There was silence between us for a long moment. I couldn't even look at her anymore. The person I had known was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I didn't know who Zoey was anymore, and I didn't know if I ever would. Finally, I stood up, unable to stay there any longer. I need time, I said, my voice firm. I need time to figure out what I'm supposed to do now. What we're supposed to do now. Zoey nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she said softly. I hope you find what you need, Martin. I really do. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. As I stepped onto the street, I realized something. I had no idea where I was going from here. I didn't know if I would ever be able to forgive Zoey, or if I would ever be able to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner. But one thing was clear. My life had been turned upside down, and now I had to figure out how to rebuild it, even if it meant doing it without her. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I knew that I had to walk it alone. The days after the coffee shop meeting blurred into one another, each morning a new weight settling deeper into my chest. I didn't know where I was heading anymore. The world felt like it was spinning in a direction I couldn't control. Zoey had told me the truth, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. She had fallen out of love with me. She had found someone else, and I couldn't even fathom how I'd gotten to this point. My apartment felt like a ghost town. It was no longer a home. The scent of Zoey's perfume lingered on the pillow, the things she had left behind like quiet reminders that she had once been there, laughing, living, loving. But now, every corner of the space screamed with the absence of her. I couldn't sleep, couldn't find the energy to eat. I wandered through the days, numb and disconnected, trying to make sense of everything. I knew I needed to move on. That's what people said, right? Time heals all wounds. But what if it didn't? What if this was a scar I couldn't erase, no matter how much time passed? I had been living my life, trusting someone who, it seemed, had already checked out, and I hadn't even realized it. I had been too focused on the small, trivial things, too blinded by routine to see what was really happening around me. Zoey had slipped away long before she admitted it to me. Then one evening, as I was sitting on the couch, trying to force myself to watch something on TV, but finding no comfort in it, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I hesitated. But curiosity got the best of me, and I stood up to open it. It was Maya. She was standing in the doorway, her face soft with concern, her eyes scanning me as if she were trying to figure out if I was still the same person she had known a few weeks ago. Without a word, she stepped inside, looking around the apartment as if she were taking in the emptiness of it all. I thought you could use a friend, she said, her voice gentle. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her I was fine, that everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't. I wasn't fine. I was barely holding it together. Maya didn't wait for me to speak. She made her way to the kitchen, opening the fridge and pulling out a couple of beers. You look like you need this, she said, cracking one open and handing it to me. I took the beer, not because I wanted it, but because I didn't know how to refuse. We sat down on the couch together, the weight of the silence between us palpable. I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, to open up. But I couldn't. Not yet. Finally, Maya spoke again. You know, she began softly, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about how Zoey's been acting. I know it's hard, but you've got to realize something, Martin. It's not just about her. I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? She paused, her eyes searching mine. You can't keep blaming yourself for everything that happened. You can't change what's already been done. But you need to take a hard look at yourself, too. Relationships don't fall apart overnight. They don't just happen. They erode slowly, over time. Zoey may have made the choice to walk away, but you also need to figure out where you went wrong. Her words stung. It was the truth, and I knew it. I had been so wrapped up in my own life, my own comfort zone, that I hadn't noticed when Zoey had started to slip away. I hadn't been paying attention. I hadn't been present in the ways I should have been. But hearing it from someone else, from someone who had been watching from the outside, made it hit even harder. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wasn't blameless in all of this. I ran my hand through my hair, frustrated with myself. I didn't see it. I didn't see how unhappy she was. I didn't see the signs. I said it out loud, like a confession, like if I admitted it, maybe I could start to change. But the truth was, it felt too late. She was already gone. Maya nodded, her eyes softening. It's not too late, Martin. You can still fix things. But not with Zoey. You can't fix her anymore. What you need to fix is you. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Maya wasn't just speaking about Zoey's betrayal. She was talking about me, about the person I had become, about the ways I had failed in the relationship. It was easier to focus on Zoey's mistakes, to blame her for everything that went wrong, but Maya was right. I had played a part in it, too. I had let my own insecurities and distractions drive a wedge between us. I had stopped being the person Zoey had once loved. But how do you fix that? How do you rebuild when everything feels broken? Maya looked at me with a quiet intensity, her voice steady as she spoke again. You need to stop looking back, Martin. The past is gone, and so is Zoey. What you do now matters. This is your chance to start fresh, to really look at who you are and who you want to be moving forward. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something. Hope. Maybe, or maybe just a sliver of clarity. I wasn't ready to move on. I wasn't ready to let go of Zoey, even though I knew I had to. But Maya was right. I couldn't stay stuck in this limbo forever. I needed to face the truth about her, about me, and about the life I was now going to have to rebuild from scratch. So what do I do now? I asked, almost pleading for an answer. Maya smiled gently, like she had been waiting for me to ask. You start by looking in the mirror, Martin. Start with yourself. You don't need to fix anyone else. Just fix you. Figure out what you want, what you need. And maybe, just maybe, things will start to make sense again. I didn't have the answers, not yet. But I knew she was right. It was time to face my own flaws, to stop hiding from the uncomfortable truths I had avoided for so long. Zoey was gone, and I couldn't change that. But maybe, just maybe, I could learn from all of this. Maybe I could rebuild. Maybe I could find myself again. As Maya left later that night, I sat on the couch, staring into the empty space in front of me. The journey ahead would be hard. It would be painful, but it was mine to walk now, and it was time to take that first step. The road was uncertain, and the scars of the past would always be with me. But I couldn't stay in the ruins forever. It was time to start picking up the pieces. Months passed after Zoey left, and while the weight of her absence never truly disappeared, I began to feel like I was coming out of a fog. The world around me, once dull and gray, started to regain its color. I had spent so much time wrapped up in the past, wallowing in what could have been, that I had forgotten to focus on what was still in front of me. I had to learn to look forward, to build a life that wasn't defined by someone else's choices. The first step was small. I started working out again, something I hadn't done in years. I didn't do it to look better or to impress anyone, but to remind myself that I still had control over parts of my life. I began picking up hobbies I had long abandoned, playing the guitar, painting, cooking new dishes. It felt good to reconnect with things that made me happy before Zoey had become my entire world. I also started going to therapy. At first, I didn't want to go. I thought it would be a waste of time, that talking to a stranger wouldn't help. But I was wrong. The therapist helped me untangle all the knots in my head, teaching me how to separate my identity from my relationship with Zoey. I had spent so long defining myself through her that I had forgotten who I was on my own. Slowly, I started rediscovering pieces of myself that had been buried for too long. I learned that I could be whole, even without her. I stopped waiting for Zoey to reach out. She had made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. I didn't want to live in the past, in the ghost of a relationship that no longer existed. I wanted to live for myself, for the person I had forgotten existed under all the hurt and confusion. One evening, after a long day of work, I found myself sitting at a local cafe, drinking coffee and watching the world go by. I had been there many times before, but this time, something felt different. I wasn't consumed by thoughts of Zoey or the past. I was simply present, enjoying the moment. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. It was Maya. She had been one of the few constants through the whole ordeal, someone who had stood by me, offered wisdom when I needed it, and encouraged me to find my way. I had never expected to develop feelings for her, but over time, I realized that maybe I had started to. We'd shared countless conversations over the months, and what began as a friendship slowly grew into something more. I hadn't recognized it at first, but now it was undeniable. She smiled as she saw me, her face lighting up in that familiar, warm way. She sat down at my table, her presence comfortable and easy, just like it always had been. "How's it going?" she asked, her voice full of care. I took a deep breath, smiling back at her. "It's going well," I said, and for the first time in a long while, I truly meant it. "I think I'm finally starting to figure things out." Maya reached across the table, placing her hand gently on mine. "I'm really proud of you, Martin. You've come a long way." I looked down at her hand on mine, then back into her eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the same peace I had hoped for when I first thought of my future with Zoey, but it was something better. It was peace born from accepting my own journey, from realizing that I wasn't defined by the past. I could create something new. "I've been thinking about that too," I said, squeezing her hand lightly. "I've learned a lot about myself these past few months, and I think I'm ready for whatever comes next." Maya smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the understanding she had always shown. "Whatever comes next," she repeated, a quiet promise in her words. As we sat there, talking, laughing, and making plans for the future, I realized that while life had a way of knocking you down, it also had a way of pushing you forward. I had been broken, but in that brokenness, I had found pieces of myself I never knew existed. I wasn't the same person I had been when Zoey left, but maybe that was a good thing. I was stronger now, more aware of who I was and what I wanted. It was a new beginning, a beginning that didn't rely on the past. And as I looked at Maya, someone who had become a part of my future, I knew that no matter what had happened, the pain, the heartache, the lessons learned, they had all led me here. To a place where I could stand on my own 2 feet again, where I could trust myself, and where I was ready to embrace whatever came next. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. The future wasn't certain, but it was mine to shape. And with that, I knew the best was yet to come.